Incoming priceless video. Please stand by.
Priceless channel.
Warning, this video may cause high blood pressure, anger, and rage. If it doesn't, then you're just a Blue ISIS supporter.
New tonight, a mother desperate for help took her teenage son to the emergency room one night last December to seek emergency mental health treatment.
Instead of getting the help he needed, the boy was violently assaulted, first by hospital security guards and then by a Lincoln County Sheriff's deputy. And it was all caught on tape. WBTV's chief investigative reporter Nick Oxner has the story.
It's traumatized him. It's traumatized me.
Jessica Long is watching video of the night she took her son to the emergency room at Atrium Health Lincolnton. She was worried he was having a mental health emergency. Her 16-year-old son didn't want to be there. He was angry, so she asked for security to help get him inside. This is what happened instead.
At no point did they tell him to put his hands behind his back, to stand still. They never tried to de-escalate the situation. They just immediately went for full-blown physical force. The guard shoves him again hard enough that my son came out of his shoes. I jumped in the middle because the guard was getting ready to tase him, and I was telling him, no, don't tase him. I don't know what's wrong.
While the first guard has his taser drawn, a second guard arrives. The taser's put away, and Long headed for her car. She wanted her son to stay and get treatment, but she didn't think this would happen next.
As soon as I turned my back, the second security guard grabbed him around his neck in a chokehold and slammed him down on the ground. He was immediately bleeding.
As all this is happening, what's going through your mind in the middle of it?
I was in shock. I didn't know what to do.
Her son was on the ground, blood from his mouth pooling on the concrete. Drive stunned twice with a taser.
Did Atrium staff act appropriately in that incident?
Based on the events, and you saw in the video, I would say they did the best that they could under the circumstances.
Maureen Swick is the executive over security at Atrium Health. She defended the security guard's actions, including tackling the boy from behind.
The officer at the time did what he needed to do to keep the young man from getting to the car.
He's not in the vehicle. His mother's standing right there. There doesn't appear to be any warning that he's going to jump on top of him. Again, is that appropriate and within the training guidelines for Atrium security officers?
Well, I think when we talk to our security officers, certainly there's always opportunities where we can do a better job and prevent an incident like this from happening again, and that's something that we intend to do.
But the violence didn't end there. After the two guards sat on top of the boy for at least 5 minutes, 4 Lincoln County Sheriff's deputies arrive on scene, tell the guards to get off the boy, and then pick him up. The boy, whose mouth had been pooling with blood, restrained on the ground, spits. Then, a deputy punches him twice, in the face. while the boy's hands are cuffed behind his back.
Your deputy punched a 16-year-old with his hands handcuffed behind his back twice. Is that an appropriate use of force?
All I saw was once, and he was pushing him back away.
When you watch the video, you don't think your deputy punched the child in the face twice?
No, he did not punch him in the face.
Lincoln County Sheriff Bill Beam defended his deputy's actions, even behavior like this, where the deputy was so worked up, the video shows, he got in Jessica Long's face and had to be taken to the ground by a fellow deputy.
He did not tackle him. One went in between the two, and another reached and grabbed him by the vest and just pulled him right around the corner.
Oh, they'd end up on the ground.
No.
I'm a worried mother, and I'm worried about my child who has mental illness. Should I be afraid to take my child to the ER at Atrium Health in the future?
Absolutely not. This was one incident. We have over 14 million patient encounters a year. And incidents like this rarely happen. And the actions that the officers took to keep others safe and to keep him safe were appropriate.
The people that I thought were going to help, they did nothing but make it worse. They created a situation that should have never happened.
If you can't go to the hospital, where can you go?
Nowhere. I won't do it again.
Did the system fail your son?
Absolutely.
Now, the boy was arrested and charged with multiple misdemeanors and felony assault on a police officer. He was held in juvenile detention for 8 days before being let out by a judge. The charges are still pending as the sheriff's office, including the deputy that punched the boy in the face, insists that felony charge stick. Jamie, Maureen?
A felony against the young man.
Yes.
Did Atrium staff follow its policies and protocols?
Well, Jamie, that's a really good question. We put that question to the executive from Atrium. You saw in that piece. We'll have more of that answer tonight at 7:30 and On Your Side tonight.
As an Atrium security guard tackles this 16-year-old boy from behind and then pins him on the ground as he lay bleeding from the mouth. He'd ultimately be stunned with a taser twice before sheriff's deputies arrived.
The people that I thought were going to help, they did nothing but make it worse. They created a situation that should have never happened.
That right there is Jessica Long, the boy's mother. She called WBTV's chief investigative reporter Nick Oxner after the incident because she wanted answers for what happened to her son. It is hard to watch. Nick is here now to talk more about this. And there are still questions about whether the Atrium guards even followed their policies and procedures, right?
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely there are, Jamie. Everything from whether it is appropriate to grab the boy to using the taser and even how the guards wrote up the incident afterwards. It doesn't appear the guards followed their own policies, and the hospital executive I spoke with didn't seem to have a good explanation as to what would happen to those guards as a result.
This incident report from Atrium Health says a security guard escalated to using force on a 16-year-old whose worried mother brought him to the ER because, the report says, the boy punched him in the face. But when you watch the video, that's not what you see. Instead, you see the guard grab the boy, his arms flailing in the air. And if you slow the video down, it's clear he didn't make contact with the guard at all. But that didn't stop Atrium executive Maureen Swick, who's over hospital security, from making the claim anyway.
So you stand by the fact that the young man actually hit the officer in the head?
You could see him swing.
That's not what I asked. Do you stand by the fact that the young man hit the officer in the head?
Yes, that's what the officer stated.
I understand that, but you've seen the video. Do you think the young man hit the officer in the head?
From the angle that I was watching the video, I could not see that, but that's what the officer stated.
Later, a second guard jumps on the boy and tackles him to the ground, busting his lip and mouth. The report says the guard assisted the boy to the ground. Atrium policy says reports are supposed to be accurate and truthful. Policy also says there's supposed to have been a use of force report completed for this incident, and something called a hot wash form filled out because the boy was stunned with the taser. Neither report was completed in a way required by policy.
It doesn't appear that there's reporting that complies with your policies. There's no reporting about the actions of the officer, what was said, his verbal attempts to de-escalate the situation. Your hot wash form doesn't include the details that are specified in your policy. How are we supposed to rely on this documentation as proof if it's not properly filled out?
Certainly the documentation needs significant improvement, and that was something when we went through and reviewed this incident, reviewed the documentation, that is something that we're taking as an opportunity that we need to work on.
Sure, but Officer Leal said that he helped the patient to the ground. Doesn't look like helping him to the ground when I watch that video. He looks like he tackled a child from behind. Is he being honest in his evaluation, in his summary? Is he being honest in his write-up of this incident?
That goes back to the report writing that I just spoke about, that we need to work on in improving.
And yet we're talking about a 16-year-old child who might weigh 120 pounds, who's taken to the ER by his mother because she thought he was having a mental health emergency, ends up getting assaulted by 2 of your security officers who then call the police, who further assault this young man. So is this the situation that kept anybody safe, and was it appropriate?
Our officers were able to contain him and keep him from hurting himself or anybody else. And again, I said we were sorry, and it was unfortunate that this young man was injured.
So he kept from hurting himself, but yet he was injured, right? We saw it, obviously, the blood on the ground. Let me play, give him the benefit of the doubt for a second. Is there any part of this incident that we're not seeing in the video clips that you're playing that would put this in any kind of different context?
We cut out from the video that you saw on TV about 10 minutes of the officers just sitting on top of the boy. But no, and I'm glad you asked this question, Jamie, because not 10 minutes ago, Atrium tweeted out a link that they say shows the full story about what happened in this incident. Surprising to me because we have the video.
Right.
You've seen the video. I don't know what we're missing about this video, but let me make this abundantly clear, Jamie. You've watched the video.
Yeah.
You've seen the actions of the Atrium security officers and the sheriff's deputy here. That's the full story.
Yeah.
Tells ABC News, Deputy Polson is employed with the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office. 16-year-old Hayden is now facing multiple charges, including felony assault of a law enforcement officer. His mother says she was just trying to get him help.
I took him to an emergency room, and he was treated like a criminal by everybody. Nobody ever treated him like a patient.
These thugs being thrown into the back of a paddy wagon. You just see them thrown in, rough. I said, please don't be too nice. Like when you guys put somebody in the car and you're protecting their head, the way you put their hand over, like, don't hit their head and they've just killed somebody, don't hit their head. I said, you can take the hand away, okay?
Voiceless Channel.